is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Board Games Unlocked, and today I'm talking about my top 10 deep games. And what I mean by that, deep games to me are games that are on their surface like either extremely one note, or there doesn't seem to be that much strategy or that much to the game, but as you continue to play it, you realize that there are many layers that go deep, that kind of like, well, I mean, I'm definitely going to obviously be giving 10 of them, 11 actually, but that they're not overly complex games. That would be I would call those heavier games. But kind of the fact that there's more than meets the eye is how I would describe deep games. So these games that I have chosen, some might consider to be heavier. I know the general consensus for a few of these are that they are extremely complex to learn, but for me, obviously this is my top 10, I don't find them that complex, but I do find them, the fact that as you're playing, you can do this, you can actually do this kind of stuff too, and that it kind of shocks you that there are multiple ways to go about certain things. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started with an honorable mention, which is Everdell. Now, Everdell is a game that as you play it, it is a tableau building, and I guess you're kind of building an engine. Obviously, it almost feels like with any tableau you do have kind of an engine going, and a worker placement. And at the end of the game, you're trying to have the most points from what your tableau gives you, different objectives that you can meet, and then, of course, with many expansions for it now, there are multiple ways to get those victory points. But at the end of the day, you want to have the most points. Now, Everdell, the reason why it is on this list is due to the fact that it's one of those games that your actions are very obvious to you. Oh, I have a worker. I can go here, get resources. Those resources will pay for this card that goes in my tableau. And you have a 15-card maximum of your tableau, and you're sitting there, which is kind of like your village. And you're sitting there, and the first time you play it, you're like, 15? Yeah, there's no way I'll get that. And then you start seeing the combos and the fact that as the game goes on from the different seasons, you get more workers, which then allow you to go to different to more areas, to get more resources, to pay for cards. But the trick of the game is that you do not want to, you are trying to do everything in your power not to pass. And the way you do that is that there are a lot of cards that let you get other cards for free. So it's like if you have the farm that lets you get like the wife for free, and then the wife gives you extra points if you have the husband and things like that. So you're obviously trying to combo off of different cards, but you're wanting to, okay, for this action, I'm just going to take a card from the open area because I have this card in my tableau that lets me get that for free. Boom, now that's free. That was one of my actions. And then you only want to use your workers for very specific purposes whenever you absolutely cannot do other things for free, or you cannot do anything else, or using a worker is going to benefit and kind of do a chain reaction of other things. Everdell definitely took me by surprise, and off of its core, like the core box and the art, which is those anthropomorphic animals, you're like, oh, it's going to be a cute, fun, light game, and it's way deeper than you think. And I absolutely love it. And the expansions are fantastic as well if you want to add more depth and complexity to that as well. So that is my honorable mention, Everdell. My number 10 just squeaked onto the list, and that is an oldie at this point, but a goodie, and that is Blood Rage. Blood Rage is a phenomenal game. At the time of this recording, I'm actually getting my miniatures painted, which is just... oh, so nice to have someone who can do that for me, because God, why would you not want to paint them? Blood Rage, and like I said, this is going to sound extremely egotistical of me, and I do not mean it that way, but I am at a point in my life where I can see that there are extremely complex games, but I rise to the challenge, and those are for me right now. And so with Blood Rage and Everdell and the games to come, I don't view them as complex. Like, I don't look at the game and it's like, oh man, that's just going to be too much for me. I enjoy those kinds of games. And Blood Rage, especially when it came out, was kind of like that. It is an area control game where you are drafting cards to build up your tribe to be able to amass the most points. Now, what makes Blood Rage extremely interesting is that it's one of those games that every time you play, you're going to find a different combination of drafting cards. There are very obvious ways of themes that you can go around. You can go, I believe, the Thor route, which is about getting points for winning battles. There's the Loki route, which is all about getting your people killed. There's the the Loki route. I don't remember now. Yeah, I mean, pretty much getting your people killed. There's I believe there's objectives that you can go for, like different goals that you can, by having, I have the most figurines in this region and in this region, and completing a bunch of goals. And then just for killing other people's enemies, you get points that way. At the end of the game, you want to be the one with the most points. But there are 3 different eras or tiers before Ragnarok, 1, 2, and 3. And the cards get better as the game goes on, but the board gets smaller because it's Ragnarok, and different sections of the board randomly get destroyed. So with Blood Rage, it's extremely interesting because every time I play it, I see someone do a tactic that I haven't seen before. My strategy is, of course, Loki. Let your people die, get a shit ton of points for going out, coming out of Valhalla and things like that. But obviously, that's not always the way to win. You can go with having monsters that are your own that you can summon and try and win battles that way, using the different effects of the monsters to your advantage. I've had someone who has stayed in an area and try to hold off that area, and they kept pillaging that, and then increasing their rage meter, their strength, and things like that to get it maxed out as quickly as possible for those 60 points. If you get them, I think all 3 of them maxed out, it's 20 each. I've seen them continuously win battles because someone kept trying to take it from them, so they stopped doing that, and they kept winning battles. And you get points for winning those battles. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of someone just holding out like that. So with Blood Rage, the strategy and the depth also comes from the drafting. What cards are going to be left out? What cards are going to be cycling around at particular points? Obviously, if you see someone trying to go for the Loki strategy, you don't want to give them Fenrir, because Fenrir lets them decide on which area is going to be destroyed. So that comes to it as well. I don't really consider that, though, as part of the depth. The depth of Blood Rage is coming from those card combinations. And you're going to see very much that what I consider deep are going to come from cards. Like utilization of cards in board games, I feel, is the best way to make a game have depth, because you have the combinations there. Mechanics alone, while there are definite examples of that, cards are going to help out a lot. So Blood Rage is my number 10. And I will say, spoiler, Rising Sun is not on this list. I feel that negotiation is extremely more prominent in Rising Sun. While you still have the same kind of idea as Blood Rage, and you do have some cards that you can get, you're not comboing off as much with those cards as you are with the tiles that you're drafting. And Rising Sun, you need that negotiation, and I think that's a little bit too swingy. So, just in case you're thinking I'm going to put Rising Sun on here as well, I did not. My number 9 might be considered one of the most complex games, but I would argue it's all about kind of how it's taught, and this is a difficult game to teach, unfortunately, but that is Root. Root is my number 9. And the way that if you're looking for tips, the way that I personally teach it is I kind of teach, there's general rules for that apply to everyone, movement and combat and all that. And then if I'm teaching new people, I only teach them what they need to do to get 30 points. Like, this is what your faction does. Don't worry about what anyone else does, because that's just going to be a little bit too complex, because it's like, oh, okay, the cats, they do this. Oh, the birds, they do this. Oh, the lizards, they do this. Oh, it's just like, oh, and also you have to remember how you work. It's just easier if you understand, hey, this is how I get points. And in Root, you win by being the first one to 30 points. Or completing a dominance card. If you're like, hey, I'm not going to get 30 points, it's not working out for me, but I might be able to sneak this goal card and win that way. Root, of course, has its depth with its asymmetry. The fact that every single faction plays completely different from one another, and how you're going to play that faction is going to be dependent on the other factions that are in the game. The aggressiveness of the players, utilizing their special powers, not only and with their factions different ways to get victory points, trying to alter your strategy in a way to actually stop someone else. And this is one where negotiation is, I would say, it's not necessarily implied, but it's a war game. So trying to be like, hey, by the way, that person's not being affected, so therefore they're gaining a lot of points. We should all probably stop them. It's a slight king of the hill mechanism, because everyone I talk to about Root, like, it's funny because whenever I play a game, I'll play a faction and then everyone will be like, oh, they're busted. And I'm like, no, they're not. You just haven't affected me. You've been attacking each other while I've just been amassing and doing what I do. Or I'll talk to other people and they'll be like, I have never played a game where the Vagabond hasn't won. And I'm like, that's interesting because the Vagabond hasn't won a single time in any of the times I've played. Or it's a very dynamic game because of that reason, that everyone thinks that some faction is overpowered. And I'm like, it has to come down to the group. Like, someone was like, talk about how the river folk were useless, and I'm like, no, they're not. The river folk, in fact, that player has to be a negotiator. They have to be the one sitting there going, hey, by the way, you can do this and this if you hire my people, and they have to position themselves in certain areas to utilize their faction. I've actually been in a game where the river folk would have won had I not been able to do a roundabout way of actually stopping them, which ended up working. It's just like that example alone is just proof of the depth of this game, because I mean, yeah, it's easy to take your faction board and read what they do. You're like, okay, I get it. This is how I get points. But even within your own faction, you find strategies of ways to utilize the map to your benefit and then gain victory points that way. And not only that, you can craft, and there's ways that you can position yourself on the board to craft better and then get additional victory points that way, utilizing the different types of cards that have the different symbols to benefit your faction. And of course, some factions are easier to play than others. So it's just fantastic. And I'm so excited that as of right now, there is a Kickstarter for 2 new factions. It's just, I'm so excited. I absolutely love Root. It is a blast to play, and I've played it at every player count but 2. Funny enough, I've played it solo. Played it with 3, played it with 4, and then I have played it with how many? 2, 4, 6. I've played it with 6. And it's amazing every step of the way. So, yep, that is my number 9, Root. My number 8 initially was higher on this list, but then because I made this list actually a while back, and then I was like, you know what? I'm sure I've played some games that actually might jump on this list, and then I did a Pub Meeple ranking. That's actually how I got this, because that is just the way to go for me at this point. I really like it. And so it slipped because I thought about it a little bit more, and there are definitely others that I feel are a little bit deeper. But once again, a game that has a massive rule book, but I have played it so much at this point that I feel like I got the rules down if I haven't already homebrewed some of them. And my number 8 is Gloomhaven. Now, Gloomhaven is probably a weird one to have on this list, because if you're looking at it, you're like, well, that's just a big box campaign, and you'd be right in that sense. And it's like, oh, okay, so you just pick a generic type of character and trudge through the different scenarios, which is at their core dungeon crawls. And once again, you would be right, but the depth of this game comes from exactly what an open world RPG does. the items that you get for your characters, the way you go about the different dungeon crawls, and the characters themselves. The characters and everything about them is what gives this game absolute depth. So if you're not familiar with Gloomhaven and what it does that makes it unique from everyone else at this point, or at the time it came out for sure, is the fact that your character has its own set of cards and a certain number of cards that they can only ever have. So for example, the Brute, which is like an Inox, your standard kind of sword and shield guy, has 10 cards. And he starts out with 10 cards, and then on your turn you take 2 cards and you play them. And each card has a top action and a bottom action and an initiative number. So you take those 2, drop them, and then on your turn, depending on the initiative value that you chose as your leading initiative, so if you have a card that says 60 and another one that says 80, you almost, in my opinion, you almost always want to go first. You do not ever really want the enemies to go first, for sure, but you might want to change your initiative with your players, because you might sit there and be like, ooh, oh, you need to do something, but unfortunately you're kind of slow right now. All right, I'll try and go as slow as possible. And so you play those, then initiative resolves, lowest to highest. So if an enemy has a 10 and you have a 12, they'll go before you. But what makes this game incredible is the fact that you have 2 options with those 2 cards. You can do your left top and then your right bottom, or your right top and your left bottom, and you can change them that way, which increases the combinations of your 10 cards, because you don't draw. You have all your cards available in your hand to try and make a combination that best fits the current situation. And this is just fantastic, because what you're trying to do with your comrades, with the other players, what they're trying to do can synergize so well with each other. This is, out of all of the type of fantasy RPG games that I have played, this is easily the best one that has that core dynamic with players. It's so cool. And there'll be times where you'll be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this combination, and then they'll play, and then like your friend who's playing whatever, the Tinkerer, will sit there and play his 2, and then you guys will be like, oh, wait a minute, we can actually do this. For example, in one of my campaigns, my friend is playing the Brute and I'm playing the Tinkerer, hence why I use those as examples. And the Tinkerer is extremely weird. He is not going to be the one dealing out damage, not a lot of it anyway, but he can drop traps, for example, and like a 6 damage trap. It's like, okay, I'll just throw that out there. And I'm like, okay, well, I have another card in my hand that I can use to pull the guy into the trap. But then I was like, wait a minute, the cards you're playing, you can actually push someone. Or I asked him, wait, can you push people? He's like, oh yeah, I can actually just change up what I was trying to, what he was initially going to do. He was doing the other combination. So that allowed him to, run up and push the guy, do damage to him, and then push him into the trap. It's things like that create so much depth to this game. All of course with you're trying to get items that you can use to enhance your cards, to kind of, you're building a character. And then when you level up, the leveling up of these characters is so versatile. It's amazing, because in my solo scenario, in my solo series for Gloomhaven, I'm playing the Brute, and in the one I'm just playing, obviously off camera, my friend is playing the Brute, and what he's doing with him is completely different than what I'm doing with him. The items that he has for him is different than the items that I have for him, and we play them differently. Now, of course, they still have their core theme. Like, the Brute is meant to be a kind of single target heavy hitter. Like, meant to deal high damage, but eventually he will exhaust himself out. And so that'll never really change, but the path that you can take with them is very dynamic, and that's the depth of Gloomhaven. Like, yes, of course, you have your choices of what you can make for each scenario, and each scenario is, in and of itself, that's what it is. If you don't do the goal, you fail, you have to do it again. So the depth of it, and that's why it's kind of further back on the list, because it's not, the whole game of Gloomhaven isn't deep, but the core of Gloomhaven is, if that makes any sense. There's just so many routes and I feel like some of them, and I have only ever seen the basic characters. That's how wild this is. I have done so much to ensure that my characters haven't retired, but I'm getting there. That I feel like it gets even deeper with other like the unlocked characters, because some of them take a little bit to learn. Like the Tinkerer, I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I feel like I am not helping, but I am helping because I'm keeping my friend alive. I'm using a lot of cards to get him his discard pile back, so he doesn't have to short rest. I'm using a lot of ones to get him his lost cards back. It's just insane, and I have only ever played Gloomhaven at 2. It gets even deeper, I imagine, if you have a full group of 4 because of just the synergy between every single one. I have played all the core characters now, and it's not a spoiler because they're all core. The Brute, the Sorcerer, the Mind Thief, the Cragheart, and then the Tinkerer. I think those are the 5 that's you can start the game with. So I have played all of them. But it's insane because there's so many times where I'm playing and I'm like, man, you know what would be great right now? The Mind Thief. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Gloomhaven and why it's my number 8 on Deep Games. My number 7 is another game that heavily utilizes cards, but it also utilizes the board, and it is a PvP style game called Black Rose Wars. Black Rose Wars has so much in relation to what I would consider serious Wiz War. If you're not familiar with Wiz War, it's a beer and pretzels, lots of cards that just, casting spells and doing whimsical things, and it's meant to be funny if you don't take it too serious, which you shouldn't. Black Rose Wars, on the other hand, is a lot more tactful. You have goals that you're, like secret objectives that you're trying to complete. You're trying to have the most points by the end of the game. And there's multiple ways to do that by, once again, getting treasures or completing objectives, and then just killing your opponent, getting their trophies for killing them or defeating them, doing damage to the board, because each tile can hold so much damage before it actually gets destroyed. And what makes this game incredibly deep is because, once again, at its core, you are trying to have the most points. And there's, of course, a bunch of ways to do that. And on your turn, you get to do 2 actions. And there's a little list of things, like, of the different combinations of actions that you can do. You can do a basic move and punch, or you can just, regularly punch. You can do 2 punches. You can do your quick spell. But, so, the whole point of the game is you have 8 schools of magic. And there are a bunch, especially, you can't see it because I moved them, but over there, with all the expansions, there's like 20-something, I believe, different schools of magic, ranging from Blood to Cthulhu to Bardic to Viking, or I don't think it was called Viking, to Diplomatic, to Illusion, to Divination, and it's one of my favorite things is the fact that they had every magic school available, and each card or each deck once again does kind of the Gloomhaven idea with a top and bottom action, and on your turn you are programming these cards so that you have a quick spell that you can do really at any time, and then you have to do your slotted 1, 2, and 3 in order. And the reason why that I think this game is so deep is just the versatility with the different schools of magic. How you decide to play the game is, you with those schools is awesome, because like you can be thematic and be like, nope, this is who my character is. He's a destruction mage. That's the school I'm going to go with, and that is a viable option. That is a very successful route to take, and especially with the expansion, I think it balanced out the destruction school because it was pretty bad. The school was good, but going up against it was hard because it just did so much damage to you. But you not only do you have 2 different options of the spells that you want to use, how you're trying to synergize them and program them while trying to read what your opponents might do is what gives this game its depth. And I really enjoy that. I love the fact that you can sit there and understand what every school does, and be like, and adapt to the way that the game is playing. So if you're playing like a 4-player game and one person keeps trying to destroy the tiles, because the tiles, once they get flipped, you get points for that, but then the ability goes away. Well, there is a school all about healing like those tiles, or if not healing them, then swapping out people's damage tokens with your tokens, so that you're the one that destroys it versus them. There's illusions that are all about like traps and making sure that if a player is going to do like an attack against you, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to play a trap card that actually, nope, that was a mirage. It wasn't me. You completely missed. And it's really cool because the trap cards, and they stay face down until someone tries to trigger them. So there's a lot of like trying to read your opponent. Oh man, what could they possibly do? It has a very Magic the Gathering vibe to it. Not, of course, in its playstyle, but in the preparation. You having your hand of spell cards and trying to decide what is best for the given moment, whether you want to hold back, whether you want to prep, what do you think your opponents are going to do. And that's the depth to this game. Because, well, I mean, once you get defeated, you don't lose. It has that adrenaline, the board game adrenaline idea, where is that whoever deals more damage to you will get the most points, but then you just go back to your room and then you start out that way. It's just so much fun to play. The variety in the Magic schools is just so awesome. I don't know why I always gesture, because that's where they were last time I played the game. They were here. But yeah, I think that just with the sheer variety of the spells, or of the schools, and how many spells are in those decks, and the fact that you do not have to stick to a school, it would have been very easy for them to be like, oh, here's this guy, and he's a destruction mage, so here's his deck. That would have been fine too. But, and with the expansion they've added to where, yes, that mage has a special ability, so he has an affinity for a school, but that doesn't mean that he can't do, bardic, magic, or he can't do divination. It's all about how you want to go about getting the most victory points, because you can kill someone over and over and over and over, and that's not gonna guarantee you a win anyway. It's not about that. You get points for it, but once again, I really enjoy the fact that it was all about victory points instead of just trying to be the last one standing, because that's kind of what Wiz War is. Wiz War is if you kill a mage, they're out of the game, and you get a permanent victory point, and first 1 to 2 wins. But yeah, Black Rose Wars just has so much synergy between all the, even if you're doing those like 2 different types of schools or multiple different types of schools, it will work. Like, you can sit there and be like, ooh, what would be cool? It'd be cool if I could predict the future and dish out fireballs. Like, that'd be pretty neat. That would help out quite a bit. So I really enjoy it. So that is my number 7, Black Rose Wars. My number 6 is a very odd game that I have put on this list, because once again, this is why I like the deep games concept, is because at its core you wouldn't think it's that deep. You would just be like, well, that seems very one note or complex, overly complex. But I think it is. I definitely think it can be complex, but I'll explain why I consider it deep, and that is BattleCon. Just BattleCon, World of Endines, really. BattleCon Unleashed. I don't know what to call them, because there's War of Endines, Fate of Endines, all those different versions of it. But, so BattleCon, if you don't know, is a 1v1 fighting game. And if you're familiar with any fighting game out there, Street Fighters, Mortal Kombat, Tekken, Dead or Alive, Soul Calibur, you'll be at least familiar with this game, because this game, if you have everything, has 90 different fighters, and each fighter plays radically different from one another. Well, I wouldn't say radically. A lot of them play radically different. You will see some similarities between fighters. There are 90 of them after all, so ideas kind of run thin towards the end, but they are still unique. A good example of that is the fact that there are a lot a lot of fighters that are all about preparation, or not preparation, predicting. So, ooh, what's your opponent going to do? And try and read them on that. But how it goes about the prediction is what's different. So here's why I think this game is very deep. Almost every fighter has the same base cards. So their dive, their strike, their dash, their shot, all of those, they have 5 cards that are the same. And of course, with 90, there's a few that are not the same. But for the most part, they're all the same. Then the fighter itself has 1 unique base card, and then I believe 6 of their own special cards, their styles. And what you do is you take 2 cards as your attack, and then you play them, and then it's going to combo with its power, its range, its power, and its priority, and its guard. So basically, the range is out of the 8 steps where you can hit them, and the power is how much damage you do if you hit them, and the priority is if you go, whoever has higher priority will go, and the guard is how much damage you can absorb without being stunned. So this is a very dynamic game. This is a game where you are trying to read your opponent, but the best part about BattleCon, for me and for Devin, who I've only ever played this game with, is the fact that this is, everything is open knowledge. Well, almost everything is open knowledge. In Exceed, which is level 99's, similar game to this, Exceed, they have a deck, so you never know what your opponent can do. Here, you can see the previous 2 sets that they made, and you have a card that tells you what cards they have in their hand, what their styles do, and of course you know the bases. So you can look at that and be like, man, what is the most optimal route for them to do? What would they do? And things like that. All knowing, well, what their finisher move is and so on and so forth. So it's a lot about reading what your opponent can get into. And the reason why I consider this to be a deep game is because if I take one fighter from whatever difficulty, they have novice, intermediate, and advanced, how I would play that fighter would be different depending on who I'm fighting against. So the combinations are astronomical. If I wanted to take, let's say, Seth, like who was I believe he was a predictor, he gained a benefit if he was able to guess the opponent's base style or base card that he was going to use, he would gain a benefit. Having that as his core ability, but also trying to figure out the combination of cards I'm going to play is going to be different depending on who he's playing against. Like and the reason why that is a decent example, because you might be thinking, oh well, wouldn't you just always predict the same way? Not necessarily, because fighters want to use different combinations for different reasons. Understanding what one fighter does extremely well, depending on where they're at on the board, is going to be, yes, I will still be predicting, that is his whole shtick, but the combination of cards that I'm going to use to try and counteract and predict is going to be different depending on the different fighters. And that's just one example. Like, there's just so many different fighters that you have to understand kind of like, ooh, what kind of combinations are going to work really well for them and for this given scenario. How do I want to bait my opponent? How do I want to kind of read my opponent? What can they do? What can I stop them from doing? How are they going to match up together against one another? Like this pair, this fighter might be completely, outclassed against the other one. And how good is the other person with that player? It's just insane. It mimics a 2D fighter so well. Because, you don't have obviously the button combinations, but it would basically be like if I played this one fighter super well all the time, and someone else is just like, oh, I've never tried them before. That'd be like me playing some pro in Mortal Kombat. Obviously, I'm going to get my ass kicked. Oh, I know how to do Scorpion Spear, and he dodged it. Oh, and he did a 17-hit combo and killed me immediately. That's almost like what this game is. Obviously a lot slower. There's no combos like that, but there are being able to read your opponent, be like, oh, yep, you're going to try and do this, you're going to try and do this, you're going to try and do this, and you're dead. So it's just insane. And I don't know if this video will come up before we actually start, but if it is, then great. If it isn't, then check it out. But Devin and I are going to be starting a BattleCon tournament. So it's one that we have made up. So if you want to know more about that, you can check out my BattleCon introduction, my tournament introduction, where I talk about all the fighters that will be in the tournament and how we're going to progress. But it's going to be fun, I think. It's one, an excuse to play more BattleCon, and two, I think it'll be a fun series that I don't believe I've really seen anyone kind of do a board game tournament. I mean, they're out there, obviously, but since the BattleCon online is basically dead, because I waited 20 minutes for a match, and it never matched up, so it's pretty much gone. But we have this, so definitely go check that out if you're interested in BattleCon at all, and you will see a wide array of exactly this, of how fighters are going to be playing differently against one another. So that is my number 6, BattleCon. My number 5 is another card game, and one where you combine different decks of cards to create your own unique combination to try and take over different locations, and that is Sorcerer. It is not Smash Up. Smash Up, I don't think, has that much. Well, it does have a similar depth to Sorcerer, but Sorcerer just does a little bit more that put it on this list instead. Sorcerer, at its core, you are trying to do the most damage to 2 different locations. There are 3 locations out there. You're trying to kill your opponent's monsters to deal damage to the location, and that's how you win. First one to destroy 2 will win the game. Now, before that, you take a sorcerer, you take a domain, and you take a lineage deck. And there's no rules to what you do. You can pick, I want to pick the demon. I don't remember his name. I want to pick the demon. I want to pick the insane asylum, and I want to pick the animals and the spider one. I don't remember what it was called. And you just shuffle all those decks together, and that is your grimoire, like your deck of, I guess, spells that you can cast, and based off of kind of who you are as a mage or as a sorcerer. And of course, it goes without saying, the decks are where the depth is coming from. The different combinations that you can do, trying to figure out, okay, what are these 3 decks? What are they going to be about? How can I make them click? How can I find the best combinations for them? Maybe they don't, although they should. Because what's great about this game is, although out of all of them, this one feels the most like Magic, because you're laying down minions, you're buffing the minions, you're doing instant spells, but what's great about that is you don't have to solely rely on luck. Everyone gets 6 actions, and it's a 2-player game, really. You can play with 3 or 4, but don't play a 2-player game. And one of your actions can be to just draw 2 cards. One of your actions can be to gain energy. Energy is what you use to pay for cards. And managing your energy for paying for cards so you can do more on your turn is just way better than just constantly having to fight for energy. And utilizing the different minions' spells or abilities, the buffs that go on them, the instants that you get to play, it's insane. Because also, not only do you have to manage and figure out what makes your deck sing, is the fact that you have those 3 decks you pick, they have like their own special abilities as well. So trying to utilize those for the different circumstances of whether you're being attacked or whether a spell's going off against you, it's insane. I very much love this game, and in fact, there's going to be a solo cooperative expansion coming out probably this year, hopefully, that makes it to where like you get to work together and fight against a boss. Also coming with new fighters, but yeah, it's whenever I first played this game, I was just blown away by it, because you don't have to deck construct. You don't have to sit there and be like, okay, I'm going to try and make this deck work and play against an opponent, trying to whittle each other down of our own life points. It's, okay, well, these 3 decks sound cool. I'll pick them, shuffle them together, and find out, okay, this was the best combination, or okay, this isn't really my playstyle, because there are decks out there that you can combine that will fit playstyles. I mean, I think the animal one is all about like taking your opponent's hand and taking cards from his deck to buff your monsters, and it essentially is a mill against your opponent. And it's no surprise that the creator of Sorcerer is also like an ex-Magic the Gathering player, so there are decks that you can pick and you're like, oh, this is a concept for Magic, and depending on your playstyle for there, will also probably fit in Sorcerer. So that's where the depth comes from. The sheer variety of the deck combinations is amazing, and how you're matching up against the opponent's deck, figuring out the combos to counteract their combos or to try and outdo your opponent. It's insane. So, I mean, because whenever it comes to cards, like I mentioned, is the fact that you will not initially see the depth there. You can't. I mean, even if you read all the cards, you're just reading them. You're like, oh, that's a good card, but you wouldn't quite understand, oh, or this card's useless, but oh, wait, if I do it with this, which then allows me to do it with this, now that's a combo. Ooh, okay, what kind of, where are these cards, what decks are they in, so I can make sure to combo them. It's amazing. So that is my number 5, Sorcerer. My number 4 initially didn't make the list because I thought that at the time a lot of people were really saying that the game was too heavy, and I guess so, but I would argue that because it's cooperative, that it is less heavy, if that makes any sense. But my number 4 is Spirit Island. And Spirit Island, oh my god, is such a blast. It is the epitome, in my mind, of a cooperative game, just because of how every single spirit and every player has to work together. There is no one spirit that is going to take over the game. Like, there's not going to be like an MVP, where it's like, man, like, because in Pandemic there's some games where it's like, wow, you did all the work, and we were kind of just here, but Spirit Island just does not have that. And once again, at its core, Spirit Island is a game where you are trying to protect the board from blight and from invaders. And there are 3 different tiers of fear that you are trying to overcome, and you can technically win in the first tier. You just have to completely wipe the board of all towns, cities, and people, which is extremely hard to do. I have never once gotten won in Tier 1. I believe we might have gotten close, but I could just be thinking about Tier 2, because in Tier 2 you have to remove the board of all towns and cities. And then in Tier 3 you only have to remove cities. Because by that point, since it's a fear deck, by Tier 3 they're all scared shitless anyway, so it's just like we just have to kind of destroy the buildings that they left behind. But what makes this game so fantastic is the utilization of, once again, the cards and the spirit abilities. And each spirit plays radically different from, everything else. So whenever you are on your turn, you are deciding, oh, how many cards can I play based on what the spirit's telling me, and are they fast or slow? This is the crux of Spirit Island, is because fast powers will go before the invaders do something. So this is your chance to kind of weaken them, because you can see exactly what they're going to do. Oh, they're going to build in mountains, and then they're going to attack in grasslands, so they'll blight this grass. So you can plan ahead of where they're going to attack and what they're going to do to try and slow the spread. And so you can play your fast powers, pay for them, and then try and do as little damage as possible. And then they do something, and then the slow powers go, and then you just rinse and repeat. What makes this so deep is the fact that there are so many combinations, so many utilizations of players' powers and players' spirit cards that benefit other people, that you are always looking at your hand of cards, trying to figure out multiple combinations, because the players are like, well, here's what I can do, because they're going to build here. I can move them all out of this region into this region. And it's like, oh, perfect, I have presence there, so I can play this card, and it's a fast, or it's a slow card, so dang it, oh, I can't do it, because then they'll still do something. And then another player could be like, wait, I have a fast card that can make other players' powers fast. And so then it's like, ooh, then I can play my slow. You can play your fast, and then we can all stop this, the biggest section of the board from happening. So, okay, boom. And it's all thematic, too. It's fantastic. This game is amazing. So you sit there, and it's like, okay, boom, all of our powers are fast, so that big, heavy area that was going to do a lot of damage, and they were going to build a ton, well, they got scared, they moved over into the grasslands, and then because of that spirit's ability to let me go, I kill them all. And this is just an example of what can happen. Like, there is a spirit in here that is all about helping other characters become fast, and it's like, okay, well, and then there's others about healing the land. There's others about causing an insane amount of fear. There's a customizable spirit. There's just so many spirits at this point that all do something different. And then you have just a deck of minor power and a deck of major power. So you can have as many minor powers, but to get major powers, you have to discard cards. And so sometimes you might be like, well, my starting cards aren't doing that much, so now I'm going to try and get some different ones that, oh, now we have some really cool combinations here. It's just so great. Similar to kind of like the BattleCon idea where everything's open knowledge, this one is pretty much open knowledge. And the fact that it's cooperative allows all the players to work together and look at other people's hands to be like, well, I don't know, maybe I'm not seeing a good combo here. And then like they'll show someone, it's like, oh, wait, no, you have that card and I have this card. And they have that card, so now we can do all this and do this awesome team MVP move versus just one person doing it kind of on their own. And the reason why that it is on this list is just that reason, that you might be like, well, I have my spirit. Oh, no. You have your spirit and your powers with everyone else, and everyone gets to make these combinations, which is why I think it's a deep game. So that's my number 4, Spirit Island. My number 3 is by far the lightest game on this list. Without a doubt, it is easily the lightest. But I had to put it on here because it blew me away with just its simple premise. And as I played it more and more, I'm just like, yeah, this is an amazingly deep game, and that is Res Arcana. Res Arcana is a game where you are dealt 8 cards at the beginning of the game, and you are trying to amass 15 points, 15 or 13. You are trying to amass a certain number of points before your opponents. And you will only ever have these 8 cards. And essentially what you do at the beginning of the game is you're dealt your 8, and you're supposed to look through them and try and figure out the best combination. It's an engine builder. You have these 8 cards of which to build your engine. And then you're like, okay, well, alright, so this might work, okay, these 2 will go together, and then you shuffle it, and then you lay it out, and you draw a certain number of cards, and you play, and you utilize these cards to tap to get, different types of mana, which will then let you, I'm going to use this card that gives me a black mana, which I can use to spend for this, that gives me, this gold, and gold's a wild, but I can use gold to buy these, monuments, these monuments which have points on them, and then they have these big, what do they call them? They're not domains. I don't think they're called domains, but they're essentially the where you have to amass a lot of mana to pay for them, and that's kind of going to be where your point generator is going to be coming from. But it's just so simple of a premise that has so much depth to it, because there's no rule set of what 8 cards go to who. You just have a deck of cards, you shuffle those, and everyone gets 8, and that's it. And you have to make do with the best of what you got with these 8 cards. And there might be instances of which it's like, oh, well, I have a dragon card, or I have a card that uses dragons, but I don't have a dragon in my deck. And it's like, okay, we'll find a way to make that card useful. It's not a matter of like, oh man, yeah, it's useless, it's a deadweight card. It's really not. There are multiple ways to use dead cards other than for their intended purpose. And now with the expansion, it actually helps out a lot more to mitigate kind of that, because there are items that you can get, that you draft items at the beginning of like the round, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna take this one, and now that that kind of helps this one card that's not really fitting in my engine. Now I can start using it. So it does help a little bit, but yeah, it is just so solid, so streamlined, and it's like some of the combinations you might get are incredibly quick, but they're slow to amass, the point generators. Some of them are very slow, but once you pull them off, then it's like, boom, okay, now I turned all this gold in for 10 points, and then I'm going to pass first, which gives me 2 points, and I already have a monastery for 1, monument for 1, so there's 13. If 13 is something you need to win, then I win. It's so good. I was blown away by this. That's one of the reasons why it was so high up, is that all the other ones, 4 through 11, well, besides maybe Everdell, is that you wouldn't expect this. Like, at least I wouldn't. Like, I understand that it is Tom Lehman, which I believe is the guy behind Race and Roll for the Galaxy, which Roll for the Galaxy almost made it as well. Almost made this list. But really, it was just like, really? 8 cards? Okay, I guess we'll see what this is about. And I'm just like, oh man, okay. So, and then because you look through it, you get to see at least probably a few combinations, and then you might be like, yes, okay, I got the 2 I wanted, so that'll get me started, and you'll draw one, and you'll be like, oh wait, this is gonna be good. And if I can use it with this item and get that item and hold that, then I'll really start kicking off my engine. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And it's my number 3, Res Arcana. And I mean, out of all of these, this is, if you're looking for a deep game without breaking the bank, Res Arcana is pretty much the way to go. It is, if you, I think it's available to get. The rest of these games are relatively expensive, especially now, unfortunately. My number 2 is my second level 99 game on here. Really, the only 2 games that they have. I know they have a lot of smaller filler games, but this is really like their bread and butter is BattleCon, and this one, which is Millennium Blades. Millennium Blades is kind of a cheat because it's a game about a collectible card game. You play out as if you went to a game store, which is almost archaic to think about, because it's like, man, who goes to game stores anymore? Not that people don't go, but the fact that 2020 happened, and it's like, man, I don't get to go anywhere. But it plays out. It's extremely meta. The fact that, oh, I'm gonna go to a I don't remember a pre-release, and oh, yep, okay, we're opening all these packs, drafting, and so on and so forth to build the best deck, and then we have a tournament to see who wins with the deck that they just now made. It's exactly that. If you've ever been to a pre-release or anything of the sort with Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh, or those are the only 2 really that I can think of, then you have played Millennium Blades, except you haven't, because of course they don't have the rights to those. So it's almost unfair for it to be on this list, but because naturally a CCG is going to be incredibly deep, for those very reasons, that there are just an unlimited number of cards of which you to make a deck that will work together. But I cannot. It's a top 10 deep games list. So with Millennium Blades, there are 2 phases. The first phase is real time, where it is kind of that timed limit of opening packs and then picking a card. However, of course, you're not opening packs in this game. The backs of the cards look like packs, which is really neat, but it is just 1 card. You have a certain amount of money that you can spend on these packs, and there's a store and there's a draft and you're just picking cards and then paying for them, and then as you're going you're like, ooh, okay, this card would work well with this one, so that's the two I'm gonna bring. And you bring, I believe, 8 cards, 8 or 5 or 6. I don't remember exactly how many you bring to the second phase, which is the tournament. But yeah, you are paying for cards, and then you're trying to, okay, well, I found a deck box that works. And then you get an accessory, which would work for this combination. And you're also trying to maybe do a little bit of set collection, because you can always sell cards to gain money back. And you can trade cards with each other, with other players. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to make the best, I'm going to say 8 card deck to bring to the second phase. And it would be, it'd be insane of me to even think about talking about some of these cards, because there are so many. Like, not kidding, there are so many different cards in this game, and there's a vast amount of different categories and just different, like booster packs, which is like their themes, like Magic has, where it's like, oh, it's this set that we're releasing. Sets are what they're called. But you combine a bunch of them to create the store, and that's what comes out for you to buy. And then you can turn in some to get like an ultimate card that might work extremely well. But you are making 8 cards, and then once everyone's done, or once time runs out, or everyone runs out of money, then you flip your board and you go to the tournament phase. And the tournament phase is where you play your cards one at a time, trying to basically get the most ranking points. And this is what I also really like about Millennium Blades, is the fact that it's not about I'm trying to destroy you, I'm just trying to get the most points. And you get a bunch of ranking points, and then whoever has the most ranking points at the end of the tournament will get victory points. And you do, I think if you do a pre-release, then you do 2 tournaments. And if you don't do a pre-release, then you do 3 tournaments. And then the points accrue for each tournament. So what's great is that you're comboing off with yourself of, okay, well, I'm going to play this card, which gives me, if it's face up, then it gives me 10 ranking points. Yay! Then, oh, it's my turn now. I'm going to play the second card, and it says if the card to the left has a fire element, then this card gets plus 5 ranking points. And I'm obviously making these up. Granted, I might not be. These could very well be cards in the game. But you get the idea, is that they combo off one another in trying to, of course, give you the most ranking points. But that's not to say there isn't any player interaction. There's what's called clashes, where you basically have a card and it's the furthest card to your right. It has a star value on it, and you clash with another player, and then you compare star values. Everyone draws the top card of the deck, adds the star value. Whoever has the highest one wins, and then the loser flips his card over, which means it's not going to count towards any of its abilities, any of its ranking points, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of ways for you to combo, with your deck box or with your accessory, to impede the opponents so that their combos aren't going to go off like they thought they would. Let's say they play one that's really crucial to their strategy. You're playing aggressive deck, so then you clash multiple times to flip it, and then that kind of throws his synergy out of whack. So it's just, this game is literally, unlimited replayability and possibilities of synergy, and it's fun. It's fun. Listen to me, because one, it's humorous. It's a lot of the decks plays off of real life things, like for example Shonen Jump, which is like the big manga that they released, where like the top 3 came from. They have a set called Shonen Leap, like things like that, and they have Lord of the Rings, Legend of Zelda, Mario, all those, Final Fantasy. They have a bunch of different like nerdy sets that you get to play, and then you'll have a card and you're like, oh, this is funny. But it's just a blast. If you love those kinds of CCG tournament things, this is definitely going to be the game for you. If you're kind of turned off from the real time, I can guarantee you the real time is extremely generous. That I would think that if you have any type of analysis paralysis, there is enough time for you to come up with 8 cards. But you also don't have to play it in real time. You can do it turn-based, which is fine that way too. But yeah, just the sheer amount of of combinations you can make. I had to put it on this deep list just because it's a card game. It is a CCG, but you don't have to keep buying it. Once you have everything, you have everything. So that's the difference. So that is my number 2, Millennium Blades. And you might be wondering what my number 1 deep game is of all time. Well, out of this top 10, and I have mentioned it multiple times throughout the this list. Subconsciously, of course, I'm just kind of explaining the deepness of certain games, but that is Magic: The Gathering. I mean, how do you get any deeper than this? How do you go? How deep do you go down the bunny trail before, or the rabbit hole, or whatever that stupid Matrix line is, before you realize that you can't claw your way out? So with Magic, and that's why it's kind of cheating with Millennium Blades, because it's like, well, Millennium Blades is number 2, and it's a board game, but here's Magic: The Gathering, which is literally a CCG. It's insane, because with Magic, you have so many different ways to play this game. Not even styles. There's Pauper, there's Modern, there's Commander, which is the way I play. There is Standard. There's Depression, and just the sheer amount of ways that you can play is insane. It's a 27-year-old game. It's been out since '93, and no other game can touch it. Like, yes, it has its hate, and yes, it has its sets that suck ass, but it's still around, and it is still going strong, and it still manages to suck people in and make them go into crippling debt. But with Magic, the core concept is, I mean, you are trying to, in Standard anyway, or most forms, you are trying to dwindle your opponent's life points to 0, from 20 to 0. And you have a deck of 60 cards that you are trying to accrue mana, that you tap to pay for spells, for instants, for sorceries, for monsters, of which to mainly destroy your opponent by lowering their life to 0. Of course, there are many other ways for you to actually win that doesn't have anything to do with attacking your opponent, but that is the base standard. The other one that I would probably say is more common is milling your opponent, which is where you just make them lose their entire library, to where if they cannot draw a card, then they lose. That's kind of probably the second most common way of winning the game. But that is really the crux of it. There's just so many different combinations. It's insane. In my short time of being back into Magic, I have seen so many busted decks, so many different ways. I mean, but if you still boil down all of the all the different elements of the deck, forest, mountain, what is it, island, plains, swamp. Is there 5? I think there's only 5. Yeah. They all have kind of their theme around them, but with just how long it's been out and how many times the set cycle, that you could easily, I was talking to a friend about this when I was back into it, you could easily just pick a theme. Oh, I want to make a human deck, I want to make a goblin deck, I want to make a only instance deck, which I don't know if that would work. It might, you never know. That would be interesting. But just those ideas, every idea is plausible. Like, are they going to be amazing? Probably not. And I've played decks where I don't even remember what they had. Some of the deck lists have names of like strategies. Like, oh, this deck is this type of deck, and it's just like, oh. But with Pauper, that's kind of where you only play, like, I believe with commons. So it's incredibly cheap, but a lot of commons, you can make some really good Pauper decks. Commander was my favorite way to play, which is where you have a commander that sits off to the side, and you have a 100 or a 99 card deck that most likely will be centered around your commander, and you have 40 life points. And the cool thing about Commander is that it gives everyone multiple opportunities to do something badass. And that's my favorite, because with Standard or Modern, it's kind of like, ooh, what's the meta? How can I win in turn 0? How can I set my deck on the table and win? And it's like, okay, that's fun. How much was your deck? $3,000? Mine's I bought it from Walmart for $20. I just wanted to play. Oh, you fucking plebe. I'm gonna go home anyway. There's definitely some stigma to Magic, but at the end of the day, Commander is the best way to play. If you're on a budget, Pauper. I mean, I could keep talking about Magic, but at the end of the day, it has to be the deepest game. Like, it's been around longer than anything that is on this list. It will be around longer than any game on this list. And it was the game that I immediately thought of whenever I was thinking of deep games. So that is my number 1, Magic the Gathering. And that is my top 10 deep games. Let me know what your deep games are. What games surprised you that on their surface looked extremely thin, and you're just like, wow, there's actually a lot to it. And let me know what you think of these games in the comments below. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you. Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more of my content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I upload any new content. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can go ahead and click that Patreon link to be taken to my Patreon, and any help is truly appreciated. Other than that, stick around for any other run-throughs or reviews or cool top 10s or whatever I feel like putting on. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.